Hello neighbors, it's Brad here from eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster diode wiring on a 2025 Ford Maverick. Now this is going to be available in a few different configurations depending on your needs. You can get it with just the wiring and the diodes, but you can also get it with a 6-way and umbilical, and you can get a variety of different umbilicals. So if you don't already have one or you aren't purchasing a tow bar that has one pre-installed, it's a great way to really get your entire tow package with your diodes. And the essential basics of a diode is sending a light signal from the taillights on the RV via the 7-way through an umbilical to the 6-way and then eventually to your taillights. The diodes serve as essentially an electrical one-way check valve. That way you never get backfeed. It's just going to send those signals. So essentially it's just going to be a wire from the front to the back, but that means that you're going to have your running lights, your turn signals, and brake lights, and it's going to keep you safe and legal. Now, something else to point out is going to be that some braking systems require you to tap into your diode wiring. And if that's the case, I'll give you a little bit of a tip later on in the installation for that process. But overall, the hardest part of this installation, I would say, is going to be running the wire underneath the vehicle, especially if you don't have a lift. That can be a little bit tricky, but this one's a fairly easy one to do. And when it comes to splicing into your factory wires, I know it can be a little bit scary sometimes to cut those factory wires, but these are very reliable. It's a really easy installation, and I'll walk you through the process. When it comes to flat towing any vehicle, including the Ford Maverick, there's going to be 5 main components that are always required, and these are at minimum that you need. Sometimes there's a few other things that you'll need to add in for it to all work cohesively, but the basic ones, starting on the vehicle side, you can have your base plate. That's going to mount to the frame of the vehicle and become the structural mounting point for a lot of your other components, but also the connection point for your tow bar. Your tow bar is going to be that connection point between your base plate and the hitch on the RV. And just like towing a trailer, you have safety chains. Here we have safety cables. So in case of a disconnect, you still have this attached to the vehicle, so it's not just free floating down the road. And speaking of that, you'll also need a supplemental braking system. It's going to apply the brakes on the vehicle as you apply them on your RV, but part of that's going to be a breakaway switch. In case of a catastrophic disconnect, if everything was to fail, this is your last line of defense. It'll pull that cable, applying the brakes on the vehicle, and that way it's not rolling down the road. Now, finally, we have our diode wiring, and this is going to transmit the light signals from the RV to the taillights on the towed vehicle, and it's using a 7 to 6-way umbilical. Beyond that, you may have, again, some smaller features, but this is going to be the main thing to get you down the road. The installation video is going to give you a great way to get your diodes installed by yourself at home. It's really not that difficult. You don't need to be an electrical expert to pull this off, but I understand sometimes you don't have the time, the place, or even the want to do this, and that's okay. But you still want those diodes installed to keep your truck flat tow ready and safe and legal out on the road. So you can find a dealer close to you by using our dealer locator. It's going to be someone in your area that can get this installed for you, and that way you can flat tow your Maverick in no time. For you DIYers, stick around. I'll walk you through the install. We'll get these diodes installed. Now, when it comes to getting diode wiring installed on your Maverick, none of it's particularly hard to do. You're essentially just going to be running wires from the front to the back taillights and tying into those lights, which is pretty simple to do. I think sometimes the hardest part with diode wiring is just getting the wire ran back. And so something that I want to point out is depending on the braking system that you're using kind of determines which route you need to go, because things like the Stay and Play Duo that use the diode wiring as basically a start to get the braking system to activate, you have to tap into that diode wiring. So it really makes it a lot easier is when you're running that wire to pull some up into the engine bay before looping back. Today we're going to be doing a Blue Ox Patriot, which is a portable system, doesn't require that, but I still kind of ran this up just in case our neighbor ever wanted to change to that fixed system. It'll make it a lot easier. So either way, our 6-pole on our Roadmaster base plate is going to eventually mount to this bracket. I'm going to wait to get our plug put in place until I have the fascia on. That way we get a nice clean look and we're not trying to fit that plug through the grill. So what we did is have our diode. Just make sure that you have some extra wire here, because as we put our plug, having a little extra slack is going to make it a lot easier. You can always cut off more. And you may notice this red wire. That's going to be for a charge line. That's a nice, easy addition that's going to trickle charge your battery as you go down the road, and it's something that you're going to want to do at the same time as diode wiring because it's going to go into that same 6-pole. So what I did, and you'll see I have some wire loom here, but this wire will just run back, and then I made my way up and kind of fished it through until I pulled it up in the engine bay. And as we look straight down, I've left this without wire loom. Our diode wiring just runs up, and then eventually I just feed this back and then drop it down safely, and that kind of avoids a lot of the suspension and moving parts up front of the engine. And that's kind of something that you're going to want to do as you run the wire. Avoid anything hot, moving, anything that can chafe or damage the wire long term. So as I fed it back down, I then routed it back to the taillights. So I'll get this raised up and show you that path. Now before I raise this up and show you that path, something I want to point out is you need to get the ground from your white wire grounded before the plug, and there's plenty of factory grounds on this truck. So as I pulled this up, I peeled my white wire back. You can see that I split it and then put a ring terminal on the factory ground. Now that does two things. Not only are we grounding the wire so we can get that electrical system to work, but all of that white wire that I split and peeled back, I cut that, and I'm going to use that later on as a jumper wire to go from one taillight to the other. So you can use any of the grounds. I do recommend doing it up front. I try to keep all of my grounds from all of my flat toe components to consistent ones that are from the factory. That way you're not chasing a bad ground. So I used that one and then kept that extra white wire. Now as I routed the wire down the firewall, I just kind of zip tied it up to keep it tidy again to avoid any of that moving stuff. And really under here it makes it fairly easy. You can see our wires kind of pulled through. This whole underbody panel is a great option to run that wiring. And it's just a few of these small little nuts that they have in place, a 10 millimeter. You can get that popped out and then drop the panel, just drop the wires in there and then tighten these back up, and that's going to keep it protected under here long term. So as we continue going back, our wires come out, and I went above the cross member again to avoid any of the suspension, and then just routed this back, zip tying it up to some factory wire loom. Now as I get to this point, we do need to split off from our driver's side and passenger side, and the way that we're going to do that is the yellow and brown, you're going to want to keep those together. That's going to go to our driver's side. So I just loop this, and then I have this wire which will pull up to our taillight pocket, and then our green I just routed over to our passenger side. So where the factory hitch is, you can zip tie this up. If you need to drop the spare tire, by all means you can do that. And this white wire, this is that jumper that I mentioned. This is all that excess wire from grounding up front. So same thing, you're going to want to route that along with that green wire to be able to go to the pocket on each side. On the passenger side, there is an underbody panel. You will probably want to take this off. It's going to make it a lot easier to get those wires safely routed up and zip tied. It's just a series of 7 millimeter screws and one plastic push pin. You pop this off, you'll be a lot happier. So at this point, we have our wire ready to be pulled up on both sides. So we need to get our taillights pulled out and then potentially grab something to pull these up. So maybe, you know, I use an airline tube, but if you have a stick or something that you can feed down to tape those wires up, to pull them up, it'll make it a lot easier. To remove both of our taillights, we're going to have screws that are going to be the Phillips head style. It's going to be an 8 millimeter socket. We'll just get both of these taken out. And then your taillight has plugs that alignment pins, and sometimes they are very difficult on the Mavericks to get to pop out. So what I recommend doing is kind of wiggle the taillight a little bit. That's going to kind of loosen that connection up a bit. And then a plastic trim tool. You want to be careful here because you can really either chip your taillight or scratch your paint. But to get these popped out can be a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to do is kind of just feed this in to get a gap if I can. And that's going to keep constant pressure, and then sometimes just pushing back, we'll start to see that gap open up a little bit, and then if we can get a trim panel tool back there, that's a good way to do it. But These are notoriously tricky. The alignment pin that's up top is just on a small tab, and sometimes it'll bend. So really just take your time. Don't damage anything. You know, that's our whole goal, is to get the diodes in and not damage the vehicle. So there we go. Just a wiggle here and pushing on it straight back. I was able to get this gap a little bit larger. And then from here, these are our pins. So one located here. Being that this is 2025, they've changed it slightly, and that's good because this is a little bit more robust than the previous ones. But if you need to pry, this is roughly where it's at. Again, just take your time. From here, we're just going to disconnect the taillight. We'll just push on this plug, get this separated, set our taillight down, and then we can head over to the other side and do the same thing. So with those unplugged, we're going to be tapping into this section of wire with our diodes. So we need to get this insulation taken off. It's just kind of almost like a fabric tape. And what I've done normally is just kind of cut a small slit, making sure not to cut wires in the process. And once you kind of get a small section, it should unravel fairly easily. But we're going to take this whole section back. There's kind of a hard tube that it goes into for protection. Just peel it all the way back and get these wires exposed. So at this point, we are going to pull up our wires. So on the driver's side, white, brown, and yellow. Again, I'm using an airline tube. This is pretty open. You could probably feed it up, but just pull this up. And if you have extra slack, that's okay. If it's excessive, I would just give yourself a nice foot. You can always, coil this up if you need to. But at this point, we're going to be starting to put some spade connections on our factory wires. So we need to cut these, and we're going to be looking for 2 wires that we're going to cut into. Now it's important here. There's a purple wire, and there's a purple with a thin black, I guess you'd say, darker color, and then there's a white with a green. We're going to be looking for the solid purple and white with green. So looking at our pinouts on the top here, it should be, if you're looking at the snap, the farthest right and the one right next to it. So what we'll do is cut roughly about here. And we're going to strip these back. And being small wires, we're going to be putting the spade connectors on here. We want to make sure there's a good bite onto it. So I'd recommend you can strip it back, a little over 1/2 inch if you want to, because I like to coil these end over end to get a little bit more bite so those spade connectors stay on there. So twist these up and then bend those over. And then on the other side, we're going to do the exact same thing. So now we'll grab the blue spade connectors from our diodes. You can just pull those off, and we're going to crimp these down. And when you crimp them down, I always suggest giving it just a quick tug, because being that they're small wires, you can crimp it and think that it's connected, and it can fall off. So we don't want to have to trace any loose connections. So just make sure that it's on there properly, and then we'll just get blue spade connectors on the remaining 3. Once you have your spade connectors on your wires, you're just going to complete the connection. So your out is going to go towards the plug, the in is going to be the other wire. So purple, purple, doesn't matter which one you put it on here, but we have our white and green on this one. So at this point, we just need to attach to the other remaining spades there. And that's where it gets a little bit different here, because we'll separate our brown and yellow wires here. I'm going to just cut off a little bit more excess that we have. And our brown is going to be our running light, and that needs to go over to the other tail light. So that's where our white wire, or that jumper wire that we ran, is going to tie into that. So as we strip these back and go to put a spade connection on it, you'll find that there's one yellow that's going to be for a larger gauge, and that's how we're going to tie those in together. So we'll strip this back. And then we'll twist these together and get our yellow spade. So this being our running light circuit is going to go to the purple, so we'll get that attached. And sometimes they're a little tight on here. And then our yellow wire, we'll get a blue spade and go on to our white and green. And once we get this plugged in, what I like to do is there's a double-sided adhesive on the bottom of our diodes. I just stick these together, and then I take electrical tape and wrap it around the wires to kind of create a wire strain. That way it's not putting direct pressure on any of our spade connections. And this will just kind of help protect it long term. But also what I'm going to do is get the wire strain kind of made here and then continue wrapping it around. And this is just going to help protect any of these connections. Normally in a taillight pocket like this, you don't get a whole lot of water or anything from driving out on the road, but this is a nice, easy way to help prevent any of that from occurring. So with this all taped up, we're going to go ahead, we'll get our taillight snap back in. And diodes should kind of feed into this pocket. Just make sure that you have clearance for your taillight to go back in without causing any issue to those wires. And then with this in place, we'll head over to the other side where we're really going to be repeating the same process, but I'll show you exactly the connections that I'll make. On our passenger side, very similar here, we have a lavender or light purple with a dark purple stripe, and then white with orange. And you're going to find that those are going to be the same outputs as the other side. So here's our clip, 1, 2. So pretty easy. It's going to be a similar concept. We'll just get these hooked up first. So here I have everything connected. I put the white wire, which is our jumper running light, to the white with orange stripe. And then our green wire goes to that purple and violet. So we'll get this all taped up and put together, taillights put back in, then we'll head up front. Now we're going to be putting our fascia back on before we get that 6-pole plug on, but you can grab your plug and I'll show you how to wire that all up. So at the front of our vehicle, I mentioned I got my fascia up and my bracket mounted, so it would be really, really tough in order to get that diode wiring in place and not have to trim out the grill. So that was my whole intention of leaving it like this, but it does make it a little bit trickier to get the diodes installed. It's going to be a similar concept, so that's why we leave a little bit of extra slack here, and I do have some wire loom already on my wires. We can tuck that in a little bit later. But what we'll do is grab our 6-way plug and pull the boot off. We're going to slide that back, and then from here we're just going to separate our wires. You might be able to get it with your fingernails and just kind of peel it back. And then we just need to strip back each end of the wire. About 1/4 of an inch should do. Our wires are going to go to the back side of our plug, and there are corresponding spots that they need to go. There's going to be some molding on the plastic with some letters that are going to designate exactly where they need to go. So at the 12 o'clock position, we have TM. That's going to be our tail marker, and these are all very small Phillips head screws. Back them out to where this opens it up. I don't recommend pulling them all the way out. They're real small, and they're kind of hard to get back in place. So once you kind of get these backed out, we're going to take these and put them in the corresponding spots. So a quick walkthrough, I'll show you it once it's hooked up, but tail marker is going to be your brown wire up top. GD is going to be ground. LT is left turn. RT is right. Your tall post that you have here is going to be for 12-volt power. So if you have that charge line, that's where we're going to tap that into. And S is kind of an open circuit. Sometimes you'll use that for indication of braking. More times than not, we don't end up using that. So I'll get these all set up. When you slide that wire in, just tighten down the screw. You don't have to get crazy. You don't want to damage the wires. And then we'll just get them all set up. So as far as the wires too, if you strip it back a little bit far back, you're going to have exposed wires when it goes into those terminals. I would recommend getting it to where that's not the case, because you don't want any of these potentially touching each other once it's all hooked up. So if you need to trim them, feel free to do that. So I got this all hooked up. I have my plug kind of flipped around, but at that 12 o'clock position, the TM, just make sure it's brown. GD, being ground, is white. LT is left turn, and that'll be yellow. RT is going to be right turn, and that's going to be green. And again, we have our charge line. Now at this point, before I get everything all together, I like to test to make sure that it's working. That way we know if we have any connections that are bad, because eventually I want to go back with some RTV silicone and just coat this up. That's going to really make it a watertight seal. For something that lives on the front of your vehicle, it's going to see a lot of water as you're out driving in the elements potentially, and we want to protect that. So before we do that, let's get it hooked up. The best way to do it is to grab your umbilical, and you can hook it up to your RV and run through the light signals. We're going to be using a test box to simulate the same thing, but we'll run through, make sure that we have our running lights, our turn signals, and brake lights. So running through our lights, we'll start with our running lights, and then we'll do our left turn signal. We'll do our right turn signal, and then finally our brakes. You don't have to get too crazy here, just kind of coat around each of them. And then from here, we're going to slide our boot on. So we'll just kind of push our wires back through, get the boot in place. And then just adding on to the protection, something that I like to do is wrap electrical tape around that so it's going to be all sealed up. But also it's a good time to take your wire loom, wrap that around your wires, and you can tuck that into the boot and tape that up as well, so that way it's nice and sealed up. And then from here, we'll just push our plug in place, and then we'll get it bolted up. And that's going to do it for the installation of your Roadmaster diode wiring on a 2025 Ford Maverick.